Welcome everyone. I'm Blair, Chalmers, Senior Manager Participation and Engagement for Hockey Australia, and we're delivering a session today called a Deep Dive into Officiating and the New Framework. We'll be going through the presentation today, and this can be viewed in conjunction with the introduction to the new Coaching and Officiating Framework, which is already up on our website. Now I'll just throw over to Liam, who will introduce himself for our next slide.
Perfect. Thank you, Blair. My name is Dixon. I'm the Operations Manager at Hockey Australia. What we're going to do is we're just going to focus on the officials today, and we're just going to start with the key changes with the new framework. So one of the best things that we've been able to achieve here is actually consistent language across the coaching and the officiating framework. So there'll be one set of terminology for all blocks moving forward. So it's much easier to understand. It's much easier as well as an entry-level umpire, official or coach. The introduction of a judge stream is really important as well. We've seen that it's definitely been lacking in the community, and some of the states and territories have already developed their own judge course structure to address this. And so that's something that we'll be bringing into the framework, and we'll be running with the help of our member associations. Will be looking to run judge courses. Some of the gaps that we've seen in the current structure will be addressed. One of them is the lack of TD courses. So similar to the judge stream, there will be actually a pathway for TDs for formal training. The other big gap that's addressed is the gap that we see between the level 1 and the level 2 umpires, where your level 1 umpires are basically operating at a junior level or a low grade senior level, and then they're expected to be operating at a 13s or under 15s nationals tournament, or otherwise a senior first grade game to be competent at that level 2 level. So just having basically a pathway that sits between those, and having a level that actually will allow umpires to more seamlessly sort of move through the pathway with achievable sort of goals is really, really important for us. The mentor and the educator roles, this is something that definitely in the off-field officiating space we've been able to address. So we will now have TO, judges, TDs, and basically off-field officiating mentor and educator roles, and this will also be where the assessors sit as well. In the umpiring space, we do have the umpire coach. They'll move into that mentor space, and there'll probably be a few extra competencies thrown in around that. But that allows us as well to separate the mentor pillar and the educator pillar, where both are about developing others, but the mentor is really a hands-on role, whereas our educator is about delivering courses, running workshops, and being able to be out there supporting the community in that sort of capacity. Part of the release of the framework that will come into effect on the 1st of January 2022 is the rollout of the new learning management system. So we're looking to have this up and running at the end of this year, so that will come into full effect for the 1st of January. But this is a really, really exciting time for Hockey Australia, with current resources being basically accessible for the whole community, and really having an engaging platform that we hope can sort of drive the next generation of officials. Continuous learning, as I've mentioned, that will be tied into the LMS. Lots of online courses, lots of educational modules that will sit on that LMS. And one of the other great pieces is the indoor officials will be recognised. So this one framework that will have officiating, coaching, and indoor officials and coaches sitting within the framework. So that's something that we'll address as well in this presentation today. Right, so what we'll do is we'll just move on to the framework so we can actually have a look at it.
Thanks, Liam. So you'll see here, if you haven't seen the introduction to the Coaching and Officiating Framework, this is what the framework looks like. So on the left-hand side there, you'll see the current terminology around community, level 1, level 2, advanced, and Australian umpire. The community, we've kept that terminology in the new framework, as in community. Level 1 is now termed developing. Level 2 is termed talent. And advanced coach is termed, or advanced is termed perform. The other thing about this framework, most of the current courses that we do sit within the lead pillar. You'll see how vertical the current framework is under the current Hockey Ed system. What we've introduced is more of a horizontal framework in conjunction with the vertical. So just to look at some of the horizontal pillars there, we've got the HIPSI pillar. The HIPSI pillar is an acronym, if we start from the bottom: Helper, Pathway, Specialist, and Elite, and we'll expand on that a little bit more during the presentation. The lead pillar is will house most of our current accreditation. Apart from, you'll see that the developing pathway pillar is actually quite a busy block in there, that developing pathway block. You'll find a lot of our level ones currently sit there, but we'll explain that during the presentation. Then we move over into the mentor and educator pillar. As Liam mentioned, the mentor and educator pillar is more about people or individuals working to develop others, whereas the HIPSI and the lead pillar is more about your own pathway in the sense of you doing officiating or doing coaching. But the mentor and educator pillars are about developing those people in the HIPSI and the lead pillars. On the right-hand side there, you'll see some short descriptions around what is meant by a helper pathway, a lead, the specialist and elite block, as well as the mentor and educator pillar. What we will be doing is developing a position description for mentors and educators. And also, I just want to focus a little bit on that community advanced pillar, that bigger block down the bottom there, where it combines a little bit of mentorship and a little bit of educator for that community space. So if we go laterally from community, you can see we go to community helper, then we've got a community lead, and then we've got the community advance, and we've touched on that in previous presentations, but just to let you know that that's a block that'll merge both the mentor and educator piece. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see there that we've just inserted the current terminology that we're looking to develop or implement from January 2022. Just a little side note there. If you were to go into Hockey Ed and have a look at your current accreditation status, you'll have this new terminology sitting next to the current terminology, just as a way of starting to get people to understand what they currently are. But you can see how the community stream laterally from community helper to advanced is a similar color there, just to guide you along that horizontal pathway. Developing is that yellow space, developing pathway, developing lead, mentor and educator. And then you've got the talent space, so talent specialist, lead, mentor and educator. And then you've got the perform elite, perform lead, mentor and educator. And some of the perform, particularly in the HIPSI and lead pillar, that perform space is more about the environment that you're actually applying your skills, knowledge, and experience, and that'll be touched on a little bit further in the presentation. Thanks, Liam.
Perfect, Blair. So excellent. So the next slide is basically taking the current framework and dropping in all of our current accreditations. So using the current language that we've got. Again, we will sort of go into the umpiring, indoor and off-field officiating in a little bit more detail, but just one snapshot here using the current accreditations dropped into the current or the upcoming framework that we're releasing. So what you'll see, as Blair touched on, is that developing block here, which is our developing pathway. Okay, that's where basically all of our level 1 courses will be housed. So the community foundation blocks down here, finishing with our community advance, which will just be a bit of a taster of that mentor and that educator. That's really about getting the foundations right before we start moving into our level 1. So before the community has the opportunity to sort of specialize and choose their I guess, bespoke sort of pathway moving forward. Again, you'll notice that the Australian level indoor umpire level 2 and level 1 sits in that HIPSI pillar. So that's really about specializing there in the HIPSI pillar. Our Australian level umpire will sit at the top here, level 2 umpire and level 1 back here. Again, we touched on the fact, and we'll get into it as well in the next couple slides. One of the other things that you'll really notice is where we see gaps. So at the moment, we understand there's people operating that educator space, but there's no actual Hockey Australia accreditation. There are a couple of FIH courses being run, and that's something that we'll look to bring in line with our framework. But basically what we want to do moving forward is acknowledge and recognize that there are educators out in the community, and again also provide a pathway so that we can bring in more educators who are looking to develop others. Okay, so what we'll do now is we're just going to start to look at the umpires, the umpire structure. So this is taking our two vertical structures at the moment. The big difference we see between sort of umpiring and coaching is that currently you do have your vertical, your vertical pathway for an umpire, but they've also got the ability to move into that umpire coach. So this is the great thing that we've been able to further develop, is actually have that horizontal stream upwards, so that you've got your umpire coach, and then obviously we've been able to separate that with your educator as well. But this is the current language, looking at the current structure, which is two vertical structures sort of sitting side by side, and we're expecting our umpire coaches to kind of sit across that mentor or that educator space. But again, as I sort of mentioned, it's one of those ones where the mentor is a real hands-on role, where we're working quite closely with our umpires, whereas our educator is someone who is actually, I guess, proficient and has those skills as well to educate potential mentors and also lead umpires around what they'll need to I guess become better in their chosen field. Okay, so what we'll do is we're just going to have a look now, the current language, the current accreditations, and where they would sit in the framework. So again, we touched on that a little bit earlier, but just with a focus on the umpires. So again, you'll see this big gap that sits between our level 1 and our level 2 umpires. So that's something that we've noticed with all our states and our territories, that there's this huge stepping stone when you go from a level 1 to your level 2. So we've been able to address this. And this is something that Hockey Queensland has already done with their level 1 advanced umpiring course, so that your level 1 umpires actually in Queensland will move into that level 1 advanced space that prepares them for the next level, which is your level 2. So that's something basically we've been able to address under the new framework. All right, so the next slide is the new terminology. Again, same slide as the previous, just the new terminology. So if you're a level 1 umpire, you'll be a developing pathway umpire. If you're a community umpire, you'll be a community lead umpire. Level 2 umpire is your talent lead umpire. Your Australian level umpire is your perform lead umpire. And then we'll be working on basically competencies for our in-between sort of block there, our building block between the level 1 and the level 2 currently. And then again, as I mentioned, our umpire coaches, they will all fall into this mentor pillar. So that's again where our assessors will sit. Your level 1 is your developing mentor umpire, your talent mentor umpire is your level 2, and then your perform mentor umpire is your level 3. Again, perform level is all about really the environment that you're operating in, which is very, very similar to the competencies and the checklist that you're already asked to basically achieve when you reach that sort of Australian level umpire or that level 3 umpire coach. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll throw over to Blair again, and we'll just have a bit more of a look at the indoor pathway. Oh, yeah.
Just sure. Before you do that, Liam, just to reinforce that gap there. So the terminology in that gap, which, as we've said, Hockey Queensland have their level 1 advanced course. When we put the course in there, that'll be the developing lead umpire. So that gap there will be called a developing lead umpire, and the course will underpin that. So you can still see that idea of developing pathway, developing lead, and then you move into your talent lead, going vertically there.
Yep.
All right, okay, on to my slide. I want to talk now a little bit about indoor, the on-field officiating for indoor umpires. This is the current framework. As we said, consistently across officiating and coaching, it's mainly a vertical framework. It's just one particular pillar. As we've indicated previously, the officials have the pillar that sit across that mentor educator at the moment. So that's a little bit of horizontal there. So this is our community indoor umpire, our level 1 umpire, level 2 umpire, and Australian indoor umpire. So if we go to the next slide, this is the current terminology into the new framework. So we still start off with that community indoor umpire. in that lead pillar there, which is the same as outdoor. And then we move into the level 1 indoor umpire being in that developing pathway pillar, which is which is a really busy block. And you'll see a slide at the end that'll show how many courses fit in that developing pathway block. And then we go into our specialist block above that. So what we're saying is that indoor umpires and indoor in general is a specialist part that people want to pursue. And then we go into that elite environment around the Perform Elite in that Australian indoor umpire. So with the new terminology, for the next slide, we've still got the community lead umpire, developing pathway indoor umpire, the talent specialist, and then the Perform Elite indoor umpire. So rather than fitting all these courses in the one pillar under the current structure, what we've been able to do is move indoor along with some other specialist parts of hockey into that HIPSI pillar. And again, that developing pathway indoor umpire will have a lot of developing pathway courses in there where people start to choose which bespoke pathway they might want to take, or they could take a number of bespoke pathways depending on what they want to do and what sometimes their community needs them to do. Thanks, Blair.
Excellent. So now we'll just have a look at the TOs. So 3 layers at the moment, very, very vertical. We definitely have TOs that are mentors and educators, but they're not formally recognized. So you can see here at the moment, it's really just a level 1, your level 2, your level 3. And then we're asking a lot of our higher level TOs to basically give back and support below them without sort of being able to give them more formal training, I guess, in around what it is to become a mentor or an educator. Okay, our next slide will basically just be using the current terminology for our accreditations, and you'll hopefully be able to sort of join the dots from what we've previously seen. But yep, our level 1 TO will sit in that developing pathway block. Level 2 TO will sit in that developing lead block, and then our level 3 TO will sit in that that talent lead block as well. Okay, so just moving to the next slide on this, and we'll use the current the new terminology. The new terminology. So again, as I just mentioned, developing pathway, developing lead TO, and then our talent lead TO. So the big introduction here is being able to address the mentor and the educator blocks. So this will be a recognized pathway, and again, something quite similar to some of the current courses that the FIH offer. All right, so what we'll do is we'll just throw over to the next slide, unless you've got anything to add on the TO pathway, Blair.
No, it's just great to see that obviously it sits within the pathway, which it was always going to do, but the introduction of the judges courses that we hope to bring in as well, and also a TD course. So they'll be coming in at some point after we work with some working groups. Excellent. So this one here is the current officiating accreditations and the new terminology. So this is just bringing all of them together on field and off field. This is what we currently have. So we've got the community lead umpire, we've got the developing pathway TO, the developing pathway umpire. And if we go straight up, we've got the talent specialist indoor umpire, and then the Perform Elite indoor umpire. We've got the developing lead technical officer, and you'll note there's no umpire course in there at the moment. That's that gap that will end up putting a developing lead umpire in there, which is a little bit of that level 1 advanced course that Hockey Queensland has developed. And then we're moving up to the developing, talent lead TO, talent lead umpire, then the Perform lead umpire. And also currently, this is what officiating currently has, which the coaching cohort don't have, is that they have the developing mentor, which is those umpire coaches. So we have the developing mentor umpire, the talent mentor umpire, and the Perform mentor umpire. And as Liam said, as we all know, those umpire managers are pretty hands-on in providing feedback and guidance to people on the pathway and how they're performing. That's how that'll sort of continue to operate. We can obviously see some gaps here there's a gap there in that community advance block down the bottom there, where we know we have people in the community already doing that community advance, mentoring and educating, entry-level umpires coming through to that community lead umpire spot. But again, we'll look to accredit people in that spot. We also have a gap across coaching and officiating in that educator space. We know that we have people that have done the FIH courses, but they're not accredited under the Hockey Australia current framework or accreditation process. So this is a framework that just recognises and accredits people in that space, but they will have a position description as well, and will have roles and responsibilities around executing that educator role. Liam, anything else there?
No, that's probably I think covered most of it. So we'll just move ahead now. I know this slide is quite sort of word heavy. It's basically potentially all the courses that will be run moving forward. I just want to note that that the TD course will be something that we'll bring in line with the TO and judge course. So we'll be basically sitting on the same pathway. But otherwise, this is basically, and a lot of these courses are currently being run. I guess the big introduction, as we've spoken about quite a lot already today, is the introduction of mentor and educator. Modules there that will be offered. So this is basically, again, you can just see everything that we've covered today dropped into the one slide. Very, very word heavy. So we don't expect you to sort of take it in one go.
Yeah, and we've also mentioned, if we stay on that slide, we've also mentioned bespoke pathways. So just to give you an example, the traditional pathway is someone becomes a community lead umpire. They then become a developing pathway umpire. They then become the talent lead umpire, and then they go up to that perform lead. That's under the old structure. Under this one, we would probably go community lead will be the idea. Start with the community helper umpire, community lead, over to the developing pathway. We can go into that one, but if we went to the developing pathway and then into the developing lead and then up to the talent lead and perform, that's kind of like the traditional, I want to do the best I can as an umpire. However, it might be a case of you start off as a community helper umpire, you then move across to the community lead umpire, and then you may go to, let's say, the developing pathway umpire. You might pop across there, but then you want to develop the entry-level umpires. So then you shoot across to the community advanced umpire position. And you might do that for a couple of years within your association or a club. And then after that, you might want to extend yourself as an umpire and move into the developing lead umpire role and up to the talent lead umpire, if you wanted to. And then eventually you might want to start developing or mentoring other developing lead umpires. So then you move across to that developing mentor umpire, where you're starting to develop others in that yellow sort of stream there around the developing pathway and developing lead. And then you may want to become an educator in that space. You're developing educator umpire there. So there's quite a number of pathways you can actually take under this framework, and there's no one single track which currently kind of exists within the framework that we're operating within now. So it's pretty exciting what people can choose to do here, and when we get the right LMS on board, the education will be something that will also be exciting for people that are registering and doing the modules.
Perfect. And I just want to note as well that the current sort of, I guess, HQ level 0 judge course, that's basically what would be thrown into this community helper block. So this is really someone getting involved for the first time. It might be a parent that's put their hand up to sit on the bench as a tech official at a local tournament, a state championship, country championship. So it's someone with very little experience, and now they've got the opportunity to just get the fundamentals and the basic skills. So they've got a bit more of an understanding when they step into that role as a judge.
And then next slide is just any questions that anyone has after this presentation is that we ask that they all get sent to hockeyed@hockey.org.au. That hockeyed terminology will be maintained through the whole implementation process and moving forward. It's just that the platform that hockeyed sits on will be different. It's currently a Moodle platform. It'll move to whatever the LMS is. And there'll be a link there to Revolutionise Sport. But if we can get questions into that email address, that would be great, because then we identify the trends of the questions and we add them to the frequently asked questions, which currently sits on the HA website, which may answer a number of your questions before you actually send a question into that email address. Have you got anything to add there, Liam?
I think that's it, Blair.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. Liam and I are more than happy to be contacted directly as well. So don't worry about not accessing us. If you feel like you want a discussion, we're more than happy to support you in understanding the framework further, and specifically in this instance, the officiating component of it. And we're more than happy to work with you and your communities to broaden their understanding of the new framework moving forward. Again, the goal is January 2022. If we don't feel like we've got everything in place, that's the LMS in place, the understanding of the framework and the link between the LMS and Revolutionise Sport. If we don't believe that that's right to go for January 2022, we'll delay the introduction. We've always got the Moodle platform there in the current system and current platform being Moodle, to rely upon to keep us going until we get this right. So it won't be rushed. We'll make sure it's right before we get it implemented. So thank you from me, and thank you, Liam.
No worries, Blair. Cheers.